Welcome to Bluegrass Brooklyn, our podcast all about the music we love, straight from the Bluegrass Borough of Brooklyn, New York.
Hello, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 7 of our Bluegrass Brooklyn podcast. My name is Liz Wolfe.
And I'm Mike Wilner.
And today we have an awesome interview with the banjo great Ned Luberecki. He is a teacher, he is a Sirius XM DJ, and lots of other things we're going to learn about.
Yeah, I don't think I covered as much ground in an interview with anybody as I covered with Ned. It was a lot of fun.
No, that's for sure. It was far-reaching and widespread.
Yeah.
So what do you got going on, Mike?
Yeah, I'm just catching my breath after that Jam Jersey event. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Liz. And we'll do a full recap of that in an upcoming episode. How about you?
Well, I also am catching up with the fun that we had at Jam Jersey. And now I'm fully focused on my next Warnick class, which is just happening in a couple of weeks, April 10th. That's a full weekend jam camp. So if you feel like you missed out on the fun at Jam Jersey because you felt a little timid about jamming, you can start getting prepared now for next year by coming to this Warnick camp. And also I want to do a quick shout out for the Silver Bay Warnick camp that's happening the last week in August, run by Austin Skelzo and Pete Warnick. So it's not one of my camps, but I will definitely be there. And if you're really considering a deep dive, it's worth looking into.
But in the meantime, please remember to follow us at Bluegrass Brooklyn. Brooklyn is spelled BKLYN on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. If you'd like to drop a line and get in touch, email us at mike@bluegrassbrooklyn.com. And if you want to check out gems in Uptown Manhattan, Bronx, Riverdale, New Jersey, and now almost the entire world, go check out bluegrassgemsnearme.com. Anything else, Liz?
No, let's get to this fabulous interview.
Yeah, let's roll. So here we are with Ned Luberecki. Ned, first of all, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, Ned is a man for all seasons banjo player, teacher, author, radio personality. But I want to get to another one of your avocations and see what we can find out. Hotel hallway photographer.
Ah, yes.
Tell me how
that's
that
my
got
true
started.
Passion.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
You know, this is the funniest thing because I talk about having a hotel hallway photo fans, and I can tell you exactly how it all started.
Uh-huh.
And I believe it was in Calgary, Canada. We were staying at a hotel that was near the airport, and this hotel was very long. It just had these hallways that stretched, I have no idea how long. It was a long, skinny hotel. And I stepped outside my door, and I saw this hallway that just went to infinity. And it was such a striking visual that I just got my phone out and lined it up and took a picture of it and posted it. And everybody, of course, made the reference to The Shining, you know, with the two little girls and, you know, that creepy part of the movie. But then somewhere else I took another picture of a hotel hallway. And so people started commenting about the carpet patterns because so many times, you know, hotel hallways have these outlandish carpet patterns, but it's never really been about that. To me, it's always about the vanishing perspective, you know, the singularity point at the end of it. But yeah, people have expected it, so I deliver.
There you go. Now we know. So let's get back to maybe the lesser part of your career. Let's talk about your banjo playing.
Oh, sure.
So first of all, let's hear your origin story for banjo.
So it goes back to about 1977, 1978. I do remember going to this was a company party for the company that my mother worked for, and they'd hired a bluegrass band to play, and I was fascinated by the banjo player. I just thought it sounded cool. And then right around that same time, Steve Martin had come out with, you know, he had a few of his comedy albums, Let's Get Small and Wild and Crazy Guy, and all my friends in school were listening to those comedy albums and reciting all the dirty jokes that were on there. But to me, I heard those little snippets where Steve played the banjo, and I just thought that was magic. And I convinced my mother to get me a banjo for Christmas. It wasn't until a little later on that I found a music store opened up nearby where they were giving banjo lessons. I was fascinated by the banjo. I was lucky in that my teacher also, he convinced me, and because when you're learning, you don't know anything and you don't suspect anything. He convinced me that if I was going to learn how to play this thing, I had to really listen to the music. So he would make me tapes, and he would tape J.D. Crowe and Earl Scruggs and a bunch of players like that, and then tell me to go out and find records by certain players. You know, he exposed me to Ralph Stanley and, of course, J.D. Crowe and Alan Mundy and Bill Keith, and I would just go out, and if I saw any of those names in a record store, I would just buy those records and take them home and just devour them.
Yeah. We are really, truly blessed nowadays with music sources online where if you want to go research a song and hear 5 or 6 versions of it or your favorite instrumentalist play it, you just go find it online somewhere, and typically you can dig it up.
Right, yeah. I wasn't raised with listening to bluegrass music necessarily, so to me, I was just fascinated by the banjo. So if I went to a music store and I saw a banjo on a record cover, I would just buy the record because it had banjo on it.
Right.
And sometimes I ended up with tenor banjo records, you know, and that style of music didn't appeal to me quite the same. But mostly I was really lucky. My teacher gave me names to look for. You know, he told me Flatt and Scruggs, the Stanley Brothers, Bill Monroe, J.D. Crowe. He really liked J.D. Crowe and Bill Emerson's playing a lot.
Right.
And then he also told me about Alan Mundy and Bill Keith. And then I remember finding a Tony Trischka record just sort of by accident, and it was called Banjo Land. And I had no idea what it was going to be. And I remember one side of that album was very bluegrassy. It had Tony Rice and Buck White and people like that on it. But the other side had drums and electric guitars.
Right.
And the thing I always joke about is that at the time, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to like that. So, so I just loved it. I just thought it was great, you know, banjo music. Listen to this is, you know, some really crazy stuff. And then, you know, of course, later on when I started playing in bluegrass bands and I found out that people sort of went into these camps of traditional bluegrass or progressive bluegrass. And if you liked one, you weren't supposed to like the other. It all affected me very little.
Good. Yeah, I got to say that I started life in bluegrass not that long ago, a couple of years ago. And I decided I was going to be a traditionalist snob. You know, I watched every Flatt and Scruggs Grand Ole Opry, and if you called a song at a jam that wasn't on one of those, I was offended. That didn't last very long, though. Then I started hearing stuff like you're describing, and then I heard Johnny Gimbel playing Western swing, and then I heard Michael Doucet playing Cajun, and it's like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm all over the place. But you played on stage a lot. You've been with a number of bands. You play with Becky Buller regularly, I think?
Yeah, that's been my primary band since, I guess it's the past 11 or 12 years now. Before that, I spent about 13 years playing with Chris Jones and the Night Drivers.
Right.
We toured all over the world with that band. I was really fortunate there. Before that, I played with Larry Cordell for a little while. I played with a band called Paul Adkins and the Borderline Band back in the 80s and 90s. That was my first band that actually traveled and went outside sort of the Baltimore. I grew up in the Baltimore area. So, and there was a Baltimore band that I kind of started in. The original name was called Grass on the Rocks. It was a band that had been around the Baltimore and D.C. area for a long time. But then we morphed into a band called the Satyr Hill Band. And that band still plays. They're still around. And that was a band I was in high school in like 1982, 83.
Wow. So you've had a lot of amazing musical collaborations over your career. What is the most memorable, impactful that you would share with the listeners?
Ooh, boy, that's a hard one. Let's see. One of the things that is still fascinating to me is that I get to be friends with people that I grew up sort of idolizing.
Yeah.
I think about a kid learning to play rock and roll guitar and sitting on the edge of his bed, you know, always dreaming of trying to be like Eddie Van Halen or whoever.
Right.
And then, you know, you get to a point in your life where you get to hang out and call Eddie Van Halen. To me, one of those was, of course, you know, players like Alan Mundy and J.D. Crowe and Tony Trischka, who have all become friends. We text each other and call and send jokes back and forth. Yeah. But one that's really strange to me is you don't, as a certain instrumentalist, think that you're ever going to go on tour with one of your idols like that. And Tony Trischka did this tour of double banjo things, and he picked me to go play with him on some of those dates. How do you justify that in your mind? To me, that would be like being a bass player and Paul McCartney calling you and saying, hey, why don't you come play bass with me too? Sort of mind-blowing to me. So all of that is still kind of amazing. And then also to find out that I am friends with these people, that it goes deeper than just, oh, I really worship your banjo playing and we're whatever. But, we're all just guys. We do the same thing. We exist in the same world. We have a lot to talk about from there. But then we're also just friends. And that's always been really special to me.
Yeah, I see that's very much a characteristic of the bluegrass world. For some reason, it's a collaborative undertaking. And the heroes, and I'm making quotes, are accessible. That I know that when I started working on this podcast, I sent out 10 Instagrams to top 10 people I'd love to have on the show, including yourself, sir. And you and about 5 others responded, sure. And I was frankly a little surprised. I expected to get radio silence, and I've gotten to meet and speak with a lot of my heroes. That's, I think, a pretty consistent feature. Speaking of on stage, we saw you on stage at the recent World of Bluegrass IBMA event.
Yeah, first year in Chattanooga. I think it went well.
Yeah, it was a great time. It was my first time, so I was like a little kid running around in a candy shop with a $10 bill in his pocket, Fortunately, my wife held my credit card, so when I got to the exhibition hall, I didn't walk out of there with 4 fiddles, 5 banjos, 3 mandolins. Because that could very easily have happened. It was quite amazing. But we loved seeing you on stage playing. I saw you playing with Becky. What else did you get to do there?
I think this year the band only was there for one day. So we played a couple of times on Friday. Becky and I did a couple of showcases and spots in other locations. I've been going to the IBMA World of Bluegrass convention since I think the very first one back in 1987. That band I was in, Paul Adkins and the Borderline Band, we played the Fan Fest the very first time. So to me, I go all the way back to Owensboro, and I've been involved with the IBMA in different kinds of capacities through the years. I've served on the board for a short time. And for the past 13, maybe 14 years, I have been the announcer for the awards show. So that's something that I look forward to every year because it's always a lot of fun. I have a unique perspective from the side of the stage. It's not necessarily the best seat in the house because I can't really hear the front of house audio very well, but I do get to say hi to everybody because they all walk right past me as they accept. I might be one of the first people they get to see after they've accepted their award. So that's always pretty exciting. I enjoy that.
How fun is that? But you know what we got most excited about is we saw you on stage with one of our hometown Brooklyn heroes. She's a 10-year-old, and
that was such a joy to get to meet her. Yes. So I was asked to be the MC at one of the festival stages, and they told me that in between the bands, they were going to have some of the participants from the Kids on Bluegrass program.
Right.
And at first, they had a group play, 3 or 4 guys, and then they asked Rie to get up, and she was just adorable and sang by herself and played the guitar, and I didn't know what to expect. You never know. I mean, sometimes when kids get up there, they're really good, and sometimes they get up and, they do their best, and it's always fun. She started to sing, and she just melted my heart, and then she played the guitar, and she's a better guitar player than I am. She's just really phenomenally talented. So, yeah, what a joy to get to hear her play, and meet her, too. She's very sweet.
Yeah, we ran into each other in the hallways, and she's like, "Hi, Mike. I just got my first full-size fiddle. Let me show you." And it was like we both got all excited. She took the thing out. Said, "Let me try it." So, yeah, it's a real pleasure to be around the next generation. And we're in jam circles together and such. We get to see it kind of firsthand. Speaking of which, do you get to do much jamming?
Every once in a while now, see, in my teaching career, of course, I teach at a lot of banjo camps and workshops and things like that. So
Right.
it's pretty often that the instructors at those things lead the jams. So there'll be a number of students, they'll split the jams into different levels, and they usually want one or two instructors to kind of moderate and be
Right.
part of it. And also, people like to jam with the instructors. So I do that quite a bit in those settings. It's also still fun every now and again when you're at a festival. Festivals are kind of a difficult place to jam if you're performing there because
Right.
you have so many other things you're responsible for. And in our case with the Becky Buller Band, I'm also the tour manager. So that means I'm trying to make sure that our sound person has got everything loaded up, that our merchandise guy is ready to bring things back to the van, to find out where we're supposed to park, when they're going to feed us, all those kinds of things. But sometimes back at the hotel or maybe in the green room, you run into some friends that you don't see all that often, and you'll get to jam and do that. And those things can be really fun because that's when we're not playing the music that we play every night. That's when we're just going back to some old standards, or we're just trying to stretch out on things, and I'll get to play with folks that I just don't see that often, but really enjoy to get to play with. And, I guess because we're talking about Brooklyn here, I'm thinking about guys like Chris Luquette, every now and again I'll see him. He's always willing to just grab an instrument and jam along. And with him, it might be anything, he might have a mandolin or a guitar or whatever. But, you get to spend a few minutes playing some music with him is always a joy.
So let's explore your banjo instructor side a little bit. I'm going to ask you two questions. First, you have a student, his name is Mike, and he's struggling, he's plateauing, he's really very frustrated with his progress. What do you do as an instructor to help guide him through that process?
Oh boy. Yeah, that can be a number of different things. Sometimes it's as simple as trying to work on a new tune. I try to remember things that happened to me as a student and how I got over them, and I try to suggest those.
Yep.
And sometimes when I would feel like I'd reached a plateau or I couldn't think of anything, I needed to drill down on one particular project. I just needed to find a fresh start, and it usually meant finding a fresh start of something that I was particularly interested in but didn't think was attainable maybe. So it would be, let's go away from the things we've been working on, like we've been working on maybe a fiddle tune or a couple of fiddle tunes in a row. And then all of a sudden I say, I've been listening to this Tony Rice record for a while. And I'd say, hey, let's try, even though you're a banjo player, let's learn this Tony Rice guitar tune. We'll see if we can come up with a way to do it. Or I'll have people say, well, I never thought I'd be able to play this Bruce Springsteen song. And I'll say, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens if we do it. See if we can find the melody. So sometimes taking a fresh approach to something like that, it means kind of eliminating the last thing you were working on and just trying something completely different.
Yeah, I could see that. Good advice. Now, next scenario. You get Mike, that's me. He's close to 70 years old, and he's decided he's going to learn the banjo. Now, he's not a 16-year-old who's got a lot of time to spend wandering around and futzing around with this or that sidetrack. So how would you tailor your instruction for someone like that?
Well, first of all, he is probably 10 years younger than the oldest student I ever had as a beginner.
Very cool.
So it's not unprecedented. I always like to warn adult students something that should be obvious, but I go ahead and say it anyway. Kids learn faster than we do. Kids' brains are wired to learn quickly, and you'll show them something and they'll play it back to you like a parrot. It comes back just immediate. It's usually wrong. It's usually way too fast, and they skip over all the details, but they get it very, very quickly. So with kids, it's always a matter of trying to slow them down and make them do it right. Adults are exactly the opposite. They're very detail-oriented. They focus on every single note. They say, I played it this way, but I noticed that I didn't get this sound exactly right. And then my focus is always say, all right, stop focusing, just play the tune. Just make the melody come out. So, those are the opposite ends of the spectrum. I usually try with all of my students to really focus on the melody, to focus on playing a tune, playing something recognizable, because if you can hear it come back out of the instrument and you know what it is, that's a huge that's a huge step right there. So we'll do that. I also like to tell adult learners that, yes, you're not going to be as fast as kids, and it's going to take you a little longer to get up to speed for jamming, but you're not alone. You're with plenty of other people who are also learning in your same age bracket, or at least same ability level, so that you will be able to play along with other people. And there are even some ways that I can give you shortcuts to say, here's something that you can do to play along in a jam, to play along with other people and keep going, even if you can't play this same break that Earl Scruggs did. Yeah, we all want to be able to do that, but, I also want to be able to play electric guitar like Eddie Van Halen. I don't think it's going to happen, but I can play a solo to one of his songs and have it be musical and have it be cool. So we'll pick our battles and move it that way. But playing along with other people is, I think, also a really important part. So getting somebody involved in, whether it's trying to get them to a jam class, they have lots of those nowadays, or get them out to festivals or someplace where people actually play together, and find somebody to pair them up with. I think that moves you along much quicker than anything I can teach.
Yeah, that's great advice. As an adult, an older adult who, a reformed banjo player who picked up the fiddle late in life, let me tell you that nearly vertical learning curve really requires a lot of discipline, a lot of focus, and a lot of stick-to-itiveness. And I feel like as an older adult, I have plenty of that. So what I lack in, nimble fingers and that kind of energy, but daily practice, sure, of course. Maybe twice or three times a day, that kind of thing. I feel like I get a little bit of compensation for that. Let's turn a little bit to your life as a radio personality. How did you begin life as a radio personality?
Ever since I was a kid, maybe 13, 14 years old, there's only three things I ever wanted to do. And that was to be a radio DJ, a banjo player, and a Jedi Knight.
2 out of 3 ain't bad, Ned.
How do you know it's not 3?
Wait, I was about to say.
The force is strong. My original inspiration in radio had nothing to do with bluegrass. It was Dr. Demento.
Oh, yes.
You remember that guy?
Of course.
For anybody that doesn't remember or never heard of him, he did a radio show where he did all silly songs, all goofy, weird songs, stuff like The Cockroach That Ate Cincinnati. And he was really one of the first outlets for people like Weird Al Yankovic, when Weird Al played accordion and armpit on songs. And so of course, my sense of humor led me to that show. My dad liked that show too. And that exposed me to the radio, and I would hear radio announcers speak. And I was fascinated by that. And I was always fascinated by the voiceover announcers on commercials, when you would hear the voice come in and say, Lucky Charms is part of this complete breakfast, including 11 minerals and vitamins that are important for, and I would try to imitate those guys. Mm-hmm. So I always liked radio, was fascinated by that. And finally, one day I was living close to a radio station. Literally, WFMD, Frederick, Maryland, was a block away from my house. And I walked over there and just walked in one day and met the program director and said, I would like to be on the radio. If you have any shifts available, maybe we could talk. And he put me on as a board op for a talk show at one point. Then, like anybody else that starts in radio, they throw you into the overnight segments because you can't really do any damage there. There's no ratings in the overnights, and it showed me the ropes. And this was a radio station where we queued up records. So I learned how to do that. We had cart machines for things. I had to do the bottom of the hour newscast. It was all sorts of things that I learned how to do from that. And I always saw radio as being a fallback day job to have that would help support my banjo playing habit.
Right.
And for the longest time, WFMD, we played music from all over the road. We played some pop hits, some top 40s, some oldies. Then I worked for other stations. I worked for a news talk station. I worked for stations playing country music. I never played bluegrass music on the air until I went to work for Sirius Satellite Radio. But before the Sirius XM merger, I worked for Sirius, and that was my first time. And that was Chris Jones that I had just started playing in his band, and he was working for Sirius, so he was telling me about it. And when Joey Black, one of our coworkers there at Bluegrass Junction, when Joey was getting married, they needed somebody to fill in, and Chris suggested me. He said, well, Ned has a background in radio. Maybe he could take over a couple of shifts. And so it was Chris that got me into that. And again, I never sort of thought that playing bluegrass music on the air was going to be a thing, because most of the bluegrass DJs that I'd known, and still to this day, many of them are volunteers, people that go in and play bluegrass on Sunday nights at a local public radio station, and they don't do it because it's a career choice. They do it because they love it.
Right.
They love the music, and they have the passion for it, and they want to get it out there to people, and God bless them. But I knew that my radio career was always sort of career oriented. I was going to be, a DJ that made money at it to pay the bills. And I knew that bluegrass wasn't going to do that, or I thought that. I didn't find out till later, wow, there is a professional bluegrass DJ position out there. And nowadays there are more of those. It's not just the satellite guys. DJs out there like Cindy Bauckham and Terry Hurd that have huge listenerships.
So what do you say the most essential skill for a bluegrass radio DJ or general radio DJ would be?
The most essential skill, and this is one that I learned through experience more than anything else, is to remember that I am not playing music to say, hey, everybody, hey, you all, hey, all the masses. I'm not addressing a crowd. I am talking to you. The most essential skill for me is to remember that if I'm talking about this Flatt and Scruggs record, whatever is important to me about it is to say, hey, listen to Earl's backup in the third verse of this song. He does this thing where he goes up high on the neck and he plays this forward roll. And it's a thing that I've been working my entire life on banjo to try to get. And it's one of the coolest things. I want you to hear, I'm excited about this. I want to tell you why I'm excited about this. And you, or it might be 10,000 people tuned in at the moment, or it might be a dozen, whoever it is. But that's the communication part of it is. Remember, you're not just an announcer. You're not there to say, and that was one from Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs and the Foggy Mountain Boys, recorded in 1956. You're not doing that. You're saying, hey, I love the Earl's kickoff on this. Little girl of mine in Tennessee, he just hits that first note, bang, listen to this. You ready? And then just push the button and let it happen.
Yeah, I've listened to you any number of times and really enjoy that aspect of it. I do feel like you're speaking directly to me. Love your More Banjo Sunday, which is a lot of fun. And it's great the way you're integrating all different parts of your career, your DJ, your banjo player, and your banjo teacher all into one thing that you love doing, which comes right across.
It's very strange how that got started. And it got started because I was teaching at a music camp. And I just was talking about it, and I said, hey, I'll tell you what, next hour I'll do a banjo lesson on the air. So just during the breaks, I did a little thing where I said, here's how you do this, here's how you do this. Didn't take much time. And then so many people wrote in and called in and emailed and said, hey, I missed it. I only heard part of it. Do it again, do it again. So I said, all right, next month, every Sunday, I will do this, at 3 o'clock. I'll do a banjo lesson to devote it to that. So that's been 10, 12, 15 years. The crazy thing is, of course, I play at bluegrass festivals and things all around the country. So people come up and say, hey, I listened to your show and I love the banjo lesson. Even though I don't play the banjo, I always think it's neat. But people have come up at banjo workshops and said, hey, I've listened to you teach banjo on the air and you made it sound easy. So I went and bought this banjo and here I am, teach me. I'm ready to do it.
Great.
And that's happened several times where you don't think people are listening or taking you seriously or that what you're saying has an impact on people. But then all of a sudden you think, wow, somebody decided that they're going to learn how to play the banjo because I did this goofy thing on the radio and somehow convinced them to do it. They thought it would be a good idea. And that hits you pretty hard, to think that you have an impact like that somebody might take that seriously. And it's wonderful.
Bringing someone to music is an incredible and important accomplishment. That's a great good deed. So well done. All right. Now I'm going to put you on the spot.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so we know that Mount Rushmore is 4 iconic individuals who, for one reason or other, stand out above others. I'm going to ask you to carve your banjo Mount Rushmore. Doesn't have to be the most famous. It doesn't have to be anything other than the 4 players who have had the most impact on you and why. But only 4.
Oh, sure. All right. Well, we've got, keeping it down to 4 is going to be tough. I'll try to do it.
There's not
Earl
much room on
Scruggs.
that mountain. There's not much room on that mountain, so 4's got to do it.
Earl Scruggs has got to be there because, of course, Earl sort of began the whole thing. I guess the next guy after Earl Scruggs that was my biggest influence would have been J.D. Crowe. It's not so much that J.D. Crowe innovated so much after what Earl Scruggs did, but he just took what Earl Scruggs did and he developed this style out of it. He made it stylistically different and just came up with this cool factor. I may gloss over, and I hate to do this to him, Bill Keith, although I think Bill Keith certainly deserves to be on that Mount Rushmore. But I was introduced to Bill Keith's playing through the playing of Tony Trischka. So I'm going to personally maybe put Tony Trischka on there only because I know that it was Tony who introduced me to the style of Bill Keith, and he probably had more of an impact on me as a player, even though Bill sort of developed the style that Tony came from. And my final, oh boy, this last one's going to hurt because it's down between Bela Fleck and Alan Mundy, because Bela he's done so many things with the banjo, but Alan's brain, the way he's thought of things, the way he's done things on the banjo. So I might have to just morph those 2 guys together. And
Well, you wouldn't be the first. Harry Clark of East Nash Grass morphed David Grisman and Sam Bush into one person to stuff him onto his Mount Rushmore. So,
boy, how do you negate one of those guys? I get it. I hear it. So I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm going with Earl, JD, then Tony Trischka, the Tony Trischka, Bill Keith morph, and then and then Alan Mundy, Bela Fleck morph. Yeah. Well, I hope those guys are all okay with that.
It's a tough question. I play fiddle or I try, and I ask myself the same question, and 40 names come to mind.
So I did a video. There's a company that I do some online lessons with called TrueFire, and they're mostly in the guitar teaching business. So they do blues and rock and roll and country and all sorts of times. There's some big shot teachers on there, and they did a series called My Guitar Heroes. And what the artist was supposed to do was to show what guitar players influence their playing and show how. So they asked me to do one on banjo, and I tried to think, boy, how am I going to do this and do it with all banjo players? And a friend of mine said, no. He said, I want you to bring your other influences. That was both liberating, but also, boy, that opened it up to so many. And I ended up with Tony Rice, Sam Bush, and Eddie Van Halen all being influences in there. And then the deep dive into looking at it, I went through the music that I'd done in the past, and it surprised me to find how they had influenced me, because you would say, well, Eddie Van Halen, you don't do any Van Halen songs on the banjo. I mean, I've goofed around with them, but there were some things actually compositionally that I found that I had stolen from listening to Van Halen. And there were rhythmic things that I learned from listening to Sam Bush, and there were definitely little melodic phrases that of Tony Rice's that have crept into my soul, that as a banjo player, I hear them when I listen to myself play. And I'm proud of that. I think that's really cool.
It's very cool. So I understand that in the not too distant future, you're going to bring the sound of banjo to giraffes and wildebeests.
That is the craziest thing. Yes, I'm scheduled to teach a banjo workshop on an African safari. So I, of course, got an email from someone saying, hey, I'm producing an African safari with music workshops. And I immediately thought, I thought of the scheme of the deposed African prince trying to get all your money. And just, I thought, well, I guess I should give this guy my credit card number now. But no, it's legit. Sierra Hull and Justin Moses are doing one for mandolin as well. The banjo has taken me to places I never would have dreamed that I would go. Mm-hmm. I have been to all 50 states playing banjo. I've been all through Europe. I've played in Moscow. I've played in Minsk. I've played on a Caribbean cruise. And this will be the furthest away yet. I mean, unless there's a workshop on the moon, I guess. And the idea is that you will we'll go on safari in the morning, then we'll come back and we'll play banjos for a while, and then we'll go on safari for some more. So I think it's really just an excuse to go on safari and take banjos with us. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be amazing. And, the banjo comes from Africa, so I feel like I'm bringing it home a little bit, maybe.
Approximately when do you think this is going to happen?
That's going to be the end of May, last week of May through June 1st of 2026. So coming up.
Fun.
Get your spot today.
Yeah. Now, if any listeners want to explore your music or opportunities for lessons or instructional materials, all that kind of stuff, how can they find out about that?
Yeah, right. Nedski.com. That is Nedski, Nedski, a nickname I picked up in I don't know, the Boy Scouts, I think. But Nedski.com is my website, and from there you can link to all the social media stuff, Instagram and Facebook and all those places.
Excellent. Okay, Ned, I really want to thank you for a fascinating conversation, possibly one of the widest ranging conversations I've had with an artist. And I look forward to the next time we run into each other.
Indeed. Mike, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that interview made me laugh multiple times. What a great, insightful, lighthearted, and yet serious man he is. Very much impressed that he has pursued not just one, being a banjo player, but two, that is to be a radio DJ. And I assume he's working on his third endeavor, which is to be a Jedi Knight.
Ned was great. I don't think I've had so many things to talk so seriously yet fun about. And I hope everybody will now rush out and listen to Dr. Demento.
Definitely encourage everybody to follow, listen, and like all of his music and get to see him when you can. Speaking of following and liking and subscribing, please do that for the Bluegrass Brooklyn podcast. Of course, those likes and follows and subscribe make all the difference. Really appreciate that. And again, you are welcome to join us at bluegrassjamsnearme.com to either list your own jam or come on out and play with us here in New York City.
Last but not least, drop us a line at mike@bluegrassbrooklyn.com with any ideas, thoughts, or suggestions. We promise we'll respond. Anything else, Liz?
No, thanks for listening.
And we do look forward to seeing you around the jam circle.